turn off the light and we'll just get started. The lesson today is on the day of the Lord. And basically the day of the Lord is what is talked about as the end times in the prophecy in the Old Testament. And so basically when you, and it's spread out through the different prophets. There's several different prophets that talk about the day of the Lord. And so it's it's an interesting thing to take the prophets in the Old Testament and what they say about the day of the Lord, and then take it and compare to what is given to us in the New Testament with the rapture, and also especially in Revelation, where a lot of this stuff is explained more fully. And then see how everything that's prophesied about the day of the Lord in the Old Testament, how it all fits just, incredibly into what is being told to us in Revelation. And we can kind of understand better what's going on and why. And so, but I like to take a look at it because it's incredible prophecy is what it is, and especially when we start seeing a lot of these things that are coming to pass in our day and age. These things were prophesied, 2,600 years ago, and you can tell how God has control over everything that's going on around us. The first thing I wanted to look at, one of the things, there's lots of times you'll look in the Bible and it'll have a heading, the day of the Lord, okay, in the prophecies. Lots of times that was not in the original. That's put in there by people that this is about the day of the Lord, and so they put in the heading, the day of the Lord. And so sometimes it's not necessarily all about the day of the Lord, and so you have to read it closely and understand. In this case, in Isaiah 2, 1 through 5, Isaiah starts out in the last days. And in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many people will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." This is interesting. It says, in the last days, yet we look at it and we see all these things that he's talking about, and what that correlates with on our timeline and everything is the millennial kingdom. Okay, when Jesus establishes his kingdom here on earth, this is what it's going to be like. This is basically what. Right there, that's what's talking about. One of the things that's interesting here is, go back, the mountain of the Lord, Zion, which is in Jerusalem, okay, where that the temple is on, it'll be exalted above the hills, and all the nations will stream unto it. And there's another one that we're going to see here later on. It says that it will be raised. The mountain will be raised up, and it will be the highest of all. In fact, it says it'll be the highest of all mountains on earth. And we're going, wait just a minute, Mount Everest is pretty high, but this is the world is going to be going through a lot of changes here before this time period, and maybe because of all of the geographic issues, I shouldn't say geographic, the geologic issues that we're going to have, earthquakes and everything else. The other mountains may not be as high. I don't know how it's going to work out, but that's what the prophecy is. But everybody's going to be coming. All the peoples on the earth all the nations of the earth will be coming to Jerusalem to worship the king. And his judgments are going to go out. He's going to judge between the nations, everybody around the world. He's going to settle disputes. So it all seems like this is a prophecy about the millennial kingdom. Here's Hosea, his prophecy about the day of the Lord. For the Israelites will have many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or household goods. And that's been the way it's been since 70 AD. Okay? They've been scattered throughout the world. They haven't had the daily sacrifice. They haven't had the high priest with his ephod. Okay? Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last day. So it's a prophecy that the Israelites are going to return from the world back to their land. Okay, and they're going to seek God and David the king. Now we know that David, as the king, okay, he died back in 1000 BC, around that time period. So what is the prophets and the prophets doing? Hosea, I'm trying to remember exactly when he was. I believe that he was one of the prophets from around the time of the exile. So we're still talking 580 BC, but it's significantly after David had died. So what is he talking about when he says David their king? He's talking about somebody in the line of David. Okay, somebody in the line of David that will be the king at that time, but it's going to be a king that's like David, and we know it's actually going to be a king that's much greater than David. Malachi, this is the last prophet chronologically, and he was prophesying around 400, probably around 440, 430 BC. It's the last prophet prior to the great prophet. Okay, last prophet certainly that we have anything written about in the Bible. See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. Now, this is interesting. You know, end times, this is all about the day of the Lord. Elijah, send the prophet Elijah to it. Now we know that Elijah, how did he die? Right, he didn't die. Right, so he was taken up into heaven in the chariot. Okay, and there's only a couple people that we know of that didn't physically have a death, as far as we know. Okay, that are talked about in the Bible. Elijah is one of them. The other one is Enoch. Okay, God enjoyed the fellowship of Enoch so much that Enoch walked with the Lord and was taken. So was taken by God to be with him. So that's interesting. This is something, it's one of those things, and what I've done is I've made a list at the end. You'll find on the back of your sheet, there is a list, and it goes through some of the scriptures that we're going to go through, and it gives a list of different things to keep in mind. And when we look at Revelation, you'll be able to see these things in Revelation. And even Elijah, many people believe that the two witnesses that are talked about in Revelation, one of those witnesses is probably Elijah, because he's talked about here as coming back during this time. And it's interesting that he turns the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. What exactly does that mean? And it's difficult to understand because one of the things that Jesus said is that he was going to be, people that followed him weren't necessarily, he was going to divide families because some people would be following him and other people wouldn't out of those families. But most of us believe that what this is talking about is the in the end days with Israel, God is going to be bringing Israel back to him, and there's their families and everything else they're going to see, they're going to understand what's going on through history and that Jesus is the Messiah, and they're going to be coming back together, and it's going to be strengthening families. Okay, Obadiah. Obadiah is a prophet from the time of Manasseh and his son Ammon. And they were both evil kings, and the society there was very evil. This is just after Hezekiah. In fact, Obadiah is actually the grandson of Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. And during this time, it's extremely bad time, and there's a lot of worship of idols, and they were worshiping these evil gods in the temple itself. I mean, they were desecrating the temple and everything else with this worship, and it was a terrible time. And Obadiah says, "The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done it, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return on your own head. Just as you drink on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually, and they will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance," which means Jacob is Israel. Israel is going to possess its inheritance. It's going to possess the area of Israel. Jacob will be a fire, Joseph a flame. Joseph represents the 10 northern tribes. Okay, when we say Joseph, it's basically talking about the 10 northern tribes. Esau will be stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. Now, Obadiah, at the time, he was prophesying. A lot of his book is prophesying against Edom, the country of Edom. And the country of Edom, which is, and I've got a map here, and we'll see, it's the area where Esau and his descendants settled. They became the kingdom of Edom. And it's also, later on, it becomes the country, the area, what is known as Idumea, okay? And King Herod was actually Idumean. He came out of that area. So we'll look at that. I've got one more on this. Okay. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau. The people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. Here's a map. And what he's talking about, you can see here's the area of Edom down here. And so he's saying that Edom is going to become part of Israel. Okay, this is the modern day Israel right now. Okay, and then what else does he say? He says, people from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau. And the Negev is right here. It's in southern Israel. They're going to be occupying this area. And then he says, and Ephraim and Samaria are going to be, Benjamin will possess Gilead, and the land of the Philistines. The land of the Philistines was all along the coast here, all the way up. There was 5 major cities of the Philistines, and Gaza was one of them. And Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. They were the 5 major cities of the Philistines, but they were all right there along the coast because they had Phoenician blood, and that's where they had settled. Right now, Israel already has the northern part of that, and the southern part of that is the Gaza Strip, which, of course, the Palestinians occupy right now. That's where they are. But what he's saying is that they will have all that area, which is interesting. The other thing he talks about is he talks about Gilead. And Gilead is this part of Jordan, present-day Jordan. It's this area right here that's just on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And that's going to become part of Israel as well.
That is all part of the promised land.
Right.
With the Canaan.
Right. In fact, there were, 3 or 4 tribes of Israel that were either in part or in full on this side of the river. And so that whole area.
2.5 tribes.
Was it 2.5 tribes? Okay. Manasseh, I think part of Ephraim. And Reuben, yeah, they were all over on that side. So yeah, it's originally part of Israel that was given by God, and what this is saying is that they're going to be in that area again.
And who who's there now?
Right now, it's the kingdom of Jordan.
Okay.
Okay, King Hussein of Jordan, and they're very friendly. They used to not be at the beginning when Israel was established. They joined in on the attack in Israel, but especially in '67, the 1967 war, this whole area was actually part that Jordan has, and it was taken all back by Israel, including Jerusalem at that time, and they were so completely defeated that that Jordan decided to make peace. Okay, and they've made peace. Basically, and have been very friendly with Israel ever since that time. They were one of the very first Arab nations to make peace with Israel, and that's something that's happening today that we can see in the news today. There are several other Arab countries that are coming in right now and making peace with Israel and starting trade with Israel. Okay, this company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in Shepherd will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go on Mount Zion and govern the mountains of Esau. The kingdom will be the Lord's. Okay, the kingdom will be ruled by God, basically. And he's talking about that basically they're going to have all this area and then up north too, all the way up. And the Golan Heights has become part of Israel now. But it's just, we see this is continuing. It's actually happening during our lifetimes. We can see this happening. Now this is interesting. There's all these different things, and we're trying to figure out the character of the day of the Lord, right? What's going to be happening at that time, according to Old Testament prophecy. And here's a warning from Amos. Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. Why do you long for the day of the Lord? The day will be darkness, not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion, only to meet a bear. Okay? It will be as though he entered his house and rested his hand on the wall, only to have a snake bite him. Will not the day of the Lord be darkness, not light, pitch dark, without a ray of brightness? This is interesting. This is a warning from God about, why do we long for the day of the Lord? Because, yeah, it's God taking over the world. It's God putting things right. It's the enemy getting. It's justice. I mean, it's our idea of justice, okay?
It's also an exposing of our sins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the other part. That's why
Mm-hmm.
call it dark.
Yeah,
We are totally exposed.
Yeah,
Well, we already are before God, we just don't see it.
yeah. So it's interesting, but Amos is kind of changing things around. We long for the day of the Lord, but he's saying, you guys don't know what you're longing for. Okay, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be bad. It is going to, and we learn that we're going to go on and we're going to see the wrath of God is poured out on the day of the Lord. Okay, and it's a dangerous thing. Okay, let's go back to Isaiah. You, Lord, have abandoned your people, the descendants of Jacob. They are full of superstitions from the east. They practice divination like the Philistines and embrace pagan customs. Their land is full of silver and gold. There's no end to their treasures. The land is full of horses. There's no end to their chariots. I don't know how many horses they have there, but they certainly have a lot of cars. Okay, and you know, he's talking to people. This is back, 2,700 years ago with Isaiah. Okay, their land is full of idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their fingers have made.
Oh my gosh. Their fingers have made.
Yeah.
What about social media and our phones?
There's all kinds of things. You know, one of the things that Israel is very, very good at today is information technology. Okay, they're one of the best, the most advanced in the world. There, even better than America, the United States, in a lot of ways. So
We're not saying that person's talking about handheld devices.
no, we don't. But it's things that we make with our hands that.
They made idols
Yeah.
out of wood and out of steel, silver, or gold
Okay.
and silver. And they made it with their hands. They hammered it together. That's the idea of it.
But yeah, sure, that's what I'm saying. But you can still see today that we make things and we put those things in front of God, okay? And we worship the things that we have made, and our pride is sucked up because of the things that we've done. We think that we're so great, and I think that this is what Isaiah is trying to bring out. We put all of our pride, and we're puffed up about this. We're so good, but he's saying that people will be brought low. Everybody's going to be humbled. Do not forgive them. And I think the interesting thing, if you go back, one of the problems that Israel has right now is there's very few of them that actually follow God at all. There's more atheists among the Israelites than there are even Orthodox. Okay, so they're going to be back in their land, but they're going to be full of superstitions. They're not going to believe in God. And their lands, I mean, they're profitable right now. And God has promised that that's what he's going to do. He's going to make them profitable. He's going to bless them incredibly, even though they don't believe in him. Okay? And that's what's happening now. Okay? They have shot up their GDP is the 24th highest in the world. Okay, and this is a nation that's about the size of New Jersey, and they've got over 8 million people in it. And they're considered about the 8th most powerful nation in the world because they have atomic weapons, they have all kinds of things. So they're wealthy, they're doing great, and they've got plenty of machines. The horses during that day and age were to get work done, and today we would say that that's the machinery to do our work for us. Okay, so I mean, all this stuff is being prophesied that that's what it's going to be like in the end of days. But the big thing is here, everybody is going to be brought low. Everybody's going to be humbled. And it's because God is going to show himself and show that we should have our eyes and our hearts and our minds on him rather than on the things we've made and the things that we can do. This is very interesting. Go into the rocks, hide in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. The eyes of the arrogant will be humbled, the human pride brought low. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. God's going to get attention, not just of Israel, but of the whole world in that day. And that's one of the things that we see talked about in Revelation over and over and over again, that God is going to be doing things, and the people are going to be hiding in caves. I think that comes next year. The Lord Almighty has a day in store for all the proud and lofty, for all that is exalted. They will be humbled. For all the cedars of Lebanon, tall and lofty, and all the oaks of Bashan, for all the towering mountains and the high hills, every lofty tower and every fortified wall, every trading ship, every stately vessel. The arrogance of man will be brought low, and human pride humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. The idols will totally disappear. People will flee to the caves and the rocks and the holes in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he rises to shake the earth. In that day, people will throw away the moles and the bats, their idols of silver. Oh, to the moles and the bats, the things that live underground and in caves. They're going to be throwing away their idols of silver, their ingots of gold, which they made to worship. Okay? So, and this is talked about very specifically in Revelation, that when God starts pouring out his wrath, and this is actually very early, that there's going to be all kinds of earthquakes that are going to be coming, and that people are going to be hiding in caves, and it doesn't matter if you're a king or if everybody's going to be hiding from the wrath of God. And they're going to realize that it's the wrath of God. And they're still not going to repent of the things that they've done. So there's a list I made about Israel, and you can probably add to this in your reading when you read Isaiah. The people of Israel, they will not believe in God when they get back to the land. They will be prosperous and wealthy. They will put things before God, so they will be humbled by God. People will be hiding in the caves and under great rocks to get away from the presence of the Lord. That's in 10 and 11. God will rise up and shake the earth, and people will hide their idols and throw them away.
Go back one slide.
Sure. And a lot of this stuff I put on the back. You can find it probably there in some areas on the back of your sheet. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to get some lists so that you could see when we get to Revelation how all this fits in to what is being taught in Revelation by John. Okay, Isaiah talks about the day of the Lord again in Isaiah 13. The last what we read was in Isaiah 2. Isaiah 13 also talks about it. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other, their faces aflame. That's an interesting, and some people think, well, is he talking about radiation sickness or something? I don't know. That's interesting. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate, to destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. Something's going to be blocking us from seeing the heavens. The rising sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty and will humble the pride of the ruthless. I will make people scarcer than pure gold, more rare than the gold of Ophir. This is interesting, and I hadn't really, when I was studying this particular thing, make people scarcer than pure gold. There's going to be so many people that are going to be killed. I mean, we have how many? 8+ billion people in this world today, yet God is going to make people more scarce than pure gold. It's interesting. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger. So there's lots of things here. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. All hearts will melt with fear. No one is going to know. We have a world that loves to be in control, especially leaders that love to be in control, and leaders that love to have control over the people that they're ruling over. And all hearts are going to melt with fear because they're going to realize that they're not in control at all, that they're not going to know what's happening and why. People's faces will be aflame. Sinners will be destroyed. Stars will not show their light. Many people think that may be because of volcanic activity. Fires. Yeah, I mean, that would add to it. Just the smoke in the atmosphere can make it so hard you can't see anything. The sun and the moon will be dark, and that's also prophesied in Revelation. People will become more scarce than pure gold. Earthquakes and the heavens will tremble. And that's an interesting thing. He says the heavens will tremble. And I'm thinking, well, is it just because of the earthquakes? Because when you're standing on the ground, you're shaking and you can't focus on anything. Is that why the heavens are trembling? Or with God's great hand, is he going to show everybody that he's in so much control that he can take all of creation, even the stars, and move them around? I don't know. I don't know. This is interesting. It's something to think about.
Those things are almost hinted at during the crucifixion.
Yeah, well, you had darkness.
The darkness, the earthquake.
The supernatural darkness that fell on the earth. Yeah, and then the earthquake. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think,
Yeah.
Even the heavens, he may change the heavenly bodies. He may
Mm-hmm.
take some out, move them around.
Well, we have an understanding of how big these things are now and how incredible they are. If suddenly these things are being moved around, you think that's going to get some people's attention? I think that it will. I have a firm belief that it won't even be halfway through the Great Tribulation, and everybody's going to know who God is. He is going to show his supernatural power because of so many things that are happening. And yet people are still going to be so fixated on themselves and so fixated on the things that they believe and their rebellion against God that they're not going to repent.
Mark,
Mm-hmm.
there's something I think that is good for us to wrestle with on this passage of Isaiah 13. If people
Okay.
open your Bibles to it,
Yeah.
it's something we have to be honestly wrestle with on it. Is that it starts off in verse 1 saying that this is the oracle concerning Babylon,
Right.
which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. So then he goes on to describe these things and how all these things that we just described are taking place against Babylon. And
Right.
then in verse 17 in particular, it says, "Behold, I am going to stir up the Medes against
Okay.
them." So
Mhm.
it's seeming like in history,
Right. He's talking about the Persians.
this is the Medes
Mhm.
coming against Babylon, and they're the next empire that comes after the Babylonian Empire. And so they are going to come and be used by God to bring down the Babylonians.
Right.
And that's, of course, what we have seen already, that God said was going to happen, and we'll see in the book of Daniel. But he's prophesying here.
Yeah.
So, in some sense, we have to say that Isaiah, in making these statements about the day of the Lord, is not necessarily only, in other words, this had a day of the Lord.
But-
where there was a day the Lord came upon people in history.
Mhm.
And he did that, he's done that several different times. Now, the thing that's interesting then is when Revelation picks up this language,
Mhm.
in other words, this is not only about the future. This is about something that actually happened in the past,
Mhm.
that happened to Babylon. Isaiah prophesied it would happen, and it did
Mhm.
happen to Babylon when the Medes came and did these things, and they did have their places, their gold gone,
Mhm.
they were wiped out. Their
Yeah.
lands, Babylon was never lived in again, and so forth and so on.
Right.
But for then Revelation to pick up this language is like, okay, there's another.
Yeah.
We, by knowing the Old Testament, we say, then that's what the final day is going to be like too. And I think it's just important that we
Mhm.
contextually handle that part well, so that
Right.
otherwise somebody may come and say, well, wait a minute, you're all talking about like this is the day of the Lord in the future, and in reality this is only the day of the Lord in history, and you've got the passages here that make it lock it into history.
But not all of it was fulfilled at that time, and that's one of the things that's interesting.
That's the question of which
Yeah.
ones of these were and which ones of these
Yeah.
were not.
Yeah. So yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, and it is important to understand that many of these things were foreshadowed, and the interesting thing is he talks about Babylon here, and we look at Babylon historically, and today we can go to the ruins of Babylon's, and there's no one living there. Yet in Revelation, Babylon is talked about again, and the great Babylon, and it talks about Babylon falling in Revelation. And even when Revelation was written at the time of John, at the end of the 1st century A.D., Babylon was already gone. It had already disappeared. And so we know that he's not talking about the historical Babylon. He's talking about something that's going to be happening in the future.
There is a historical Babylon, but
Yeah.
there is a quintessential Babylon
Right.
as well.
And the interesting thing is we'll talk about that because what Babylon represents and where it might be, but we can't get caught up in that because there's a lot of people that are saying lots of different things about what the Babylon and Revelation is talking about. But we just have to understand what it represents and how it's going to be destroyed by God.
We do not have enough conversations over the historical consistency of this God who does not change.
Right.
All of these old are examples
Yeah.
of what he does.
Yep.
And if we look at him that way, God doesn't change,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay?
And his power doesn't wane, and he's always been powerful enough to do this stuff in the past, and he has done it at different times. Yet we refuse to see that today in our lives. We believe that,
We think our
supernatural things are things that everybody is talking about today. That we don't believe in any kind of supernatural things. Our scientific materialism rules all that out. But if you take a look at history, there are so many things in history that are unexplained that can only be explained through supernatural means. But we say, oh, that's just people that can't be because it doesn't fit with our worldview. So
we're the ones who have changed.
yeah. So very, very interesting. There's a lot of, So one thing about Isaiah that's very interesting is he pulls so much stuff in, and his language is, sometimes he repeats things over and over again, but he gives a different aspect every time he talks about it. So sometimes it's hard to get raw data out of it because the language is very emotional, but the meaning is there, and the feeling that Isaiah brings into his writing is just incredible. The major teaching about the day of the Lord probably comes in Zechariah 14. And I was going to read that whole chapter to you. If I can find it here. And because there's just so much of it that And he is one of our last, there it is, one of the later, this is the last chapter, basically, of Zechariah. Behold, and I have, you can look on the back, I have the first one that I have of the list is Zechariah 14, and as I read, you can see these things popping up. And the interesting thing is, this is one of the greatest places to look at and to see how things turn out and how they're explained in Revelation, because many of them are come directly from Zechariah 14. Behold, a day is coming for the Lord when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. For I will gather the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, the half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fights on the day of battle. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley. And that half of the mountain will move toward the north, and the other half toward the south. And you will flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains to reach to Azeel. Yes, you will flee just as you flee before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah the king of Judah, when the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. Then the Lord my God will come, and all his holy ones with him. And it will come about in the day that there will be no light. The luminaries will dwindle. And I think what the luminaries, I think, are stars, right? I was trying to look. But for it will be a unique day, which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night. It will come about in the evening time that there will be light. And it will come about in that day that living waters will flow out of Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea, and half of them, the other half, towards the western sea. The eastern sea being the Dead Sea, and then the other half toward the western sea, and the western sea is the Mediterranean Sea. It will be in summer as well as in winter, and the Lord will be the king over all the earth, and in that day the Lord will be the only one, and his name the only one. All of the land will be changed into a plain from Gebet to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will rise up and remain on its site from Benjamin's gate as far as the place of the first gate to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hanel to the king's wine presses. And people will live in it, and there will be no more curse, for Jerusalem will dwell in security. Now this will be the plague which the Lord will strike all the peoples that have gone to war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they stand on their feet, their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongue will rot in their mouth. And it will come about in the day that a great panic from the Lord will fall on them, and they will seize one another's hands, and the hand of one will be lifted against the hand of the other. In other words, they're going to be killing each other. And Judah will fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be gathered, gold and silver and garments in great abundance. So also like this plague will be the plague on the horse, the mule, the camel, the donkey, and all the cattle will be in those camps. Then it will come about that any who are left in all the nations that went up against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles. And it will be that whenever the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. So if you don't go and bow the knee before Jesus, your nation's not going to get any rain. for that year. If the family of Egypt does not go up or enter, then no rain will fall on them. And it will be the plague with which the Lord smites the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Booths. It will be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Booths. In that day there will be inscribed on the bells of the horses, holy to the Lord. And in the cooking pots in the Lord's house will be like the bowls before the altar. And every cooking pot in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holy to the Lord of hosts. And all who sacrifice will come and take of them and boil in them. And there will no longer be any Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts in that day. A lot of information here. One of the very first things, and probably one of the most important things, is who is going to be raising up the nations against Israel? It's going to be God. God is going to be raising up the nations against Israel. And you know, God's in control. And what we're going to see is we're going to see lots of these things happening, and God is the one who's in control. He's actually the one that's making it happen. Jerusalem's going to be captured. It's going to be ransacked. It's going to be plundered and despoiled. Okay? That's going to happen. Half of the people will be sent to exile. The other half will stay. And in Revelation, it talks about this as well. God's going to then fight for Jerusalem against all the nations of the earth. He's going to come back. He's going to put his feet on the Mount of Olives. He's going to stand on the Mount of Olives, and it will be split in half, with the valley going west to the Mediterranean Sea and the east to the Dead Sea. The Jews will flee by that valley to Azeel. Now, Azeel is a very interesting word. It's also used as Azael with an A instead of an E. But we really don't know where that is. We have not identified that spot. There's an Azariah, which is just south of the Mount of Olives. But that doesn't make a lot of sense that would be the place where he's talking about, because the valley is going to go all the way to the Dead Sea, and people are going to be fleeing that way. And so many people think that may be Petra, okay, that people flee to. And you'll see a little bit more of that in Revelation that talks about the people fleeing. And that God is going to protect them while they flee. In fact, that's one of the things that Michael, the archangel, is going to do.
How does your verse 5 read in your version?
Yeah, this is the NASB, and so it's a little different than, of course, some other versions. And you will flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountain will reach to Azeel. Yes, you will flee just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him.
Well, when I was doing a little study on where Azeel is, it's like a town, a little site that is just a little bit outside of Jerusalem, but it's on the Mount of Olives itself.
Right, it's the southern side of the Mount of Olives.
So when the Mount of Olives splits, it's like this is saying that from the valley will come all the way to Azeel, or basically to where the Mount of Olives is. It's going to be, that valley will be there, so it's going to be the full lane. In effect, it's saying it's the full lane. It'll go all the way from those seas to the Mount of Olives itself. So that's your new valley. You get to run it through. But
Okay.
I don't think. I think it's just a great thing to say, hey, God's giving them an opportunity to get out of there.
Right.
And to be able to flee
And
this valley that he's made for them almost.
yeah, to make it through. And the thing is, he says that he's going to protect them where they go. That the defender of the nation of Israel, which is generally considered to be Michael the archangel, is going to be manifested. He's going to be there, and he's going to be defending Israel from what we find out in Revelation is the forces of the Antichrist. And we know that angels aren't any pushover. That one angel of the Lord visited the Assyrian camp and killed 183,000 men, in one night. That's pretty good. We don't know how. Angels are very different than we are, so they'll be fine. Yeah, what I had read about Azil is that was one idea, is that it was Azariah down there on the southern part, and the idea is that the valley goes all the way across, and that they're going to be able to exit and flee through that valley instead of having to go up and down the hills and everything where they'd be exposed.
Because now it's a hard walk.
Yeah, yeah.
But then it won't be.
Jesus is going to be the king over all the earth. The land of the south of Jerusalem will become like a garden. It says like the Arabah. That's that area that's south of Jerusalem, which is the Judean hills that he's talking about now. It's even a pretty barren area today. But what he is saying is that whole area is going to become like a garden. The mountain of Zion will be raised, and how that works, it's going to be raised up. We don't know how that's going to work. God will strike all the nations that fought against Israel with a plague. Flesh and eyes will rot out, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Some people think, well, this sounds like it could be radiation sickness. It sounds like it could be a lot of different, we don't know. But it seems like he's not just talking about the people that are there at the battle, but he's talking about people in the nations, wherever they are on earth. People will be seized with a great panic. They will turn on each other. They're going to fight against each other and kill each other. The king and Israel will loot the nations surrounding Israel. All nations will come to Jerusalem to worship the king. The Lord Almighty is what it says. At the Feast of the Tabernacles. And if the nation refuses to come to worship Jesus at that time, that nation, wherever it is going to get no rain for a year. So he's supernaturally enforcing his reign on the earth. So it's interesting, and to look at these things, and then we'll compare them with Revelation when we get to Revelation. I wanted to take a little time to talk about Zephaniah 1. And I'll just read a little bit of it, but you'll find that it has a very different character than a lot of the other.
Mark,
Yeah.
before you go there,
Yeah.
I just think it's so important. I don't see how anybody could read the Bible and be an amillennial
Right.
believer
Right.
with Zechariah 14.
Right.
Because he literally comes, his feet are on the land,
Mm-hmm.
he's there ruling all, and then he's afterwards having all the nations are coming to him in Jerusalem.
Right.
Well, that's not in the past ever been happening.
No. And
That's not eternity.
right.
Where he's got to, where he's going to be bringing, withholding rain if you don't come and worship him and honor him as nations.
Right.
I mean, does that sound like eternity? Does that
No.
sound like heaven? No.
No.
So it's got to be the millennial kingdom.
Right. Right. This is all yet to come. I mean, it's very specific about the geographical change here too. Very specific, and those things have not happened. And to think that this has already happened and that we're living in the millennial, you cannot believe in the inerrancy of the Scripture and in a literal interpretation of the Scripture and be an all-millennialist. You can't do it. So.
And right now we have a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once, I mean, the theory is that we will come up with a antibiotic or whatever.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that more aren't coming.
Oh yeah.
This is just a,
No, there's several waiting in the wings.
right, and this plague here about the
Yeah, and
burning out the eyes, I mean, that's just
yeah.
terrible.
I do not believe that the pandemic that we have right now is talked about in the Bible anywhere.
I don't think so.
Okay, It may be you can take a look at the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which are the first four seals that are broken by Jesus, and one of those is about pestilence. Okay, and pestilence is going to be around the earth, and people are going to be suffering from it, and there's a ton of people that are going to die. This may be a foreshadowing of that, but that's all it is. Okay, that's all it is.
Especially people were always never under the impression that a world pandemic could even happen.
Right.
They're all like.
But we know that it can happen now. We've been shown this, and it's an interesting crisis because this crisis is changing the world, and it's allowing things to happen that are going to change the world. So it's something. Time. Okay. It's something to look at, but I know that they're already talking about. There are 5 other diseases right now that are brewing in China that they're afraid are going to be the next great pandemics. It seems like China is the spot where these things are coming out of right now. So, okay. I just wanted to read the first couple of verses of Zephaniah. We're not going to go into it too much because I wanted to show you some things. I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth. And this is labeled as the day of the Lord in Zephaniah, but I don't think that label was not put in there by the writer himself. Okay? I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away both man and beast. I will sweep away the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, and the idols that cause the wicked to stumble. When I destroy all mankind on the face of the earth, declares the Lord. Zephaniah, it really seems like much of what Zephaniah is talking about he's not even talking about the millennial reign. He's not talking about, it seems like he's talking about at the end of the millennium, okay, when the great battle happens, when the devil is loosed again and he draws all the nations against God again, that's when everybody is going to be wiped out. The only people that are going to be left are the people that believe in God. We're going to be rescued from the earth, and all of the earth and all of the heavens are going to be destroyed, and they're going to be remade by God. Okay? We know that that's happening, and that seems to be what Zephaniah is talking about. So,
Mark, I've been in several churches in my lifetime.
yeah.
And you always get a piece here and a piece there
Yeah,
and a piece
yeah.
there. But if you lay down, it falls together.
And that's what.
And Jeremiah and Ezekiel alone will blow your mind.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, just those 3. I see those 3 together, not counting the others.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do next week. Is we're going to see Ezekiel has some very specific prophecies at the end of Ezekiel that we can see happening directly in the world today. And so that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to spend time just on Ezekiel. And chapters 36, 37, 38, and 39. And we can see these things coming to fruition around us in the world today. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I just want to give a warning a little bit. Zephaniah, when you read it, it's not like the rest of the prophecies about the day of the Lord. It seems like it's more after the millennial kingdom is what it's talking about. Zephaniah prophesied during the time of the evil king Manasseh, and some of his prophecy is about the coming destruction of the Babylonians. That's what it was about. The rest of his prophecy. Okay, let's put this together. So, why do people like us look forward to the day of the Lord?
Promise of afterwards.
Okay, there's a promise of afterwards, but even looking forward to Jesus coming and making things right. I mean, we have a love of justice. We have a hate of sin. Okay, we want to see things made right. We want to see the justice of God being brought out. And so we look at the day of the Lord and we say, yes, God's finally going to come and he's going to make the people that are doing evil are no longer going to be able to get away with it. finally, there's going to be justice. Okay? We see that, but why are we warned not to look forward to the day of the Lord? Because it's the end. No one is going to, when the day of the Lord comes, after that, there's going to be very few people who are going to be able to make a choice for God. It's the end, okay? They're going to be judged.
That last part. Very few people, any of us,
Yeah.
have somewhere in our lives a touch of pride.
Oh yeah. And there's. So what's the reason for the day of the Lord? The justice. It's showing that there is going to be justice, okay, and that God is going to bring it about. What are the other times in history that God has shown His objection to the pride of mankind? One that I can think of right off the top of my head is the Tower of Babel or Babel. People were working together, and He said, "No, we've got to split this up," okay, because they had this pride. They built this huge tower up to the sky to show that they were just as powerful as God, and He changed that. Yeah. And now, what do we do with all the accomplishments that we have? We think that we're engineering genetics. We're doing all these different things. We think that we have the power of God. We can clone human beings. We can do all these different things, and that's that pride that is coming up. Okay.
We can only do what God allows us to do.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Pride extends to the Christians who think they know what the Bible's saying.
Well, that's the thing.
And even as I say, we know what this says.
Yeah.
Back up a little bit, because
Yeah.
I don't think any of us has a total concept or understanding of the God that we serve.
Yeah. Well, the more you read, and the more you're sanctified by the journey that we're all on with God. Once you become a child of God, He changes your mind. He changes your heart. You begin to see things more from a divine perspective as you go. And right now, God's arms are still open wide, asking everybody to come to Him. Okay, and He's given us the way through the cross to do that, and that's still the important thing. But there will come a day, and from what it looks like, as we're studying the world around us, it's not a day that's too far off. Okay, when the wrath of God is going to be poured out on the earth, and people are going to pay for their rebellion against God. And he's done it in the past. Noah is another example of him pouring out his wrath on the earth. Sodom and Gomorrah, the same way. So.
The Old Testament is a book of failures.
Yeah.
Failures of
Mm-hmm.
mankind.
Yeah. Next week, it looks like we're just out of time. Next week, we're going to talk about Ezekiel and the specific prophecies there. And then after that, we're going to start going into Revelation and spending time putting all these things together in the book of Revelation, because Revelation, everything fits in. So let's go ahead and dismiss with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we love you. We thank you for just the way you take care of us, the way that you've promised to us, that you will be with us through thick and thin, that everything that happens, no matter what happens here on earth, that you're in control, that you're sovereign, and that we can rest in you, that you have promised to give us the peace that passes all understanding when we see the chaos around us. We see things disintegrating around us, that you are the Prince of Peace. You will be with us. You will give us strength. And you've also promised us that we are your children now, children of love, not children that are destined to God's wrath. And we love you for that, and we thank you because we know that you are a God of justice just as much as you are a God of love, and that you will bring about justice in the end. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.